kick off recording. So tonight we have search that we want to implement in the library project. We have the second half of the how to adult slides that I would like to go through. But I want to start off with any questions from your capstone projects, any general concepts that you would like to review, or any questions about the library code from last night that we want to re-review before we dive into adding search.
Could we go over some more another example of mapping real quick?
In React? Yep.
Yeah. Doesn't necessarily need to be connected to a database or anything.
Sure. So,
Actually, it might be better for me to understand if we just made like an array in React, I think.
yep. So I'm gonna just do this in the day. You know what? I'm gonna get the day 2 set up just so the live shares are there. And I don't have to create a React project from scratch. So I'm gonna go back and delete node modules, go front end, delete node modules. Something is syncing to iCloud Drive and it's freaking me the flip out. Oh, it's downloading one item. No idea what that is. Okay. Um, Sorry, I've got a long history with iCloud Drive losing files. I'm going to duplicate that. I'm going to rename it day 2. I'm going to open it in VS Code. And it goes there, backend goes there, live share. And Austin, I just saw, oh, you had a note yesterday about the search in the currently reading list. So we can circle back to that as well. We'll do front end and back end. Okay. So your request was, get these both fired up. So I'm just going to do this in the homepage so I don't have to set up another file. So if we are in here and we have something like, I don't know, name a data type or some example dummy data that you want to use.
Let's just do cars.
Cars. And in our cars, I'm going to make it fancy and do a make and a model. And we'll I'm actually surprised that it didn't default to JSON when I provided it to it, but whatever. Okay.
When I have memories on, it usually does for me, but I don't know if 3.5 has it.
I think they upgraded everyone to 4.
Oh, well, I don't know.
Anyway, I'm gonna throw that in there. So I got all my cars. Now the problem is, just like when we get data back from the database, this is an array. So if we try to show this down in the return here, right? If I just say, go show me the cars, I get an error and it's like objects are not valid. It's an object, an array, either one. React does not know how to show this information. We technically could JSON stringify it, but that doesn't do us much good because we don't want to display it. Oh, thanks, Austin. Yeah, I think you're right. You get a couple GPT-4 questions a day, and then it defaults back to 3.5. Um, So we could stringify it, but obviously this is not how we want to display this data to the user. So instead, what we can do is we can say, hey, we would like to do a cars.map that gives us access to each individual car. So you can think about a map as a for loop that is returning some content. So in here, we can return a UL that says something like, go show me the car.make with a colon and a car.model. And sorry, this needs to be an LI. And that shows us all of our data from the array. But we can get fancier than that if we wanted to. That loop is just saying, what do we want to show up for each individual item? We could do something as fancy as this. We could do a table with a T head that's got a table row with a table header that says make and another table header that says model. And then we will put in a table body which will return a table row. And inside that table row, there will be a table data with the car.make, and then another table data with the car. And what that ends up doing, if I don't have an extra character in there, is puts all of that information in a table. And then we could even do something here like put a style on this of border 1px solid gray. Okay, put it on the cell instead. And that gives us our nice little table there.
And if you wanted to reuse that, you would just make it a React component by putting it in a separate file.
Wanted to reuse the row or wanted to reuse the table?
The whole table. If you
The
want to
whole
put it
table.
on, say, like a multi-page or somewhere else, even on the same page.
Yeah, so you could put it in a separate file. I'm just going to put it down here at the bottom. We could say our const table is going to take our data. And then it is going to return. And then we're going to go up and take our entire table here and pass it in here. But instead of looping over cars, I'm going to loop over the data because that's what I'm sending in the props. So what I'm able to do now is up here, I'm able to add my table and say my data is going to come from my cars. And then I could do another table with data and we could say the make is Apple and the model is MacBook, or the make is Microsoft and the model everything they make, and close that off. And we can now reuse our make and our model.
Microsoft's not that bad for things.
So to give you an idea of what we're doing here, data is the prop, cars is the value. This is an example of using that variable and coming back up here and grabbing all of that and passing it in here. Or we can still reuse that data prop, but here we're just making an inline array and defining the data there. So both of these are working the same way, but we're passing that data in as a prop because even though a component is reusable, doesn't mean that every component needs to be exactly the same. So when we go down to this table component, we just set it up as another variable, but then we get access to the prop right here. So an easier example of that may be something like a button that's going to have button text. That's going to return a button that has the button text inside of it. And then we could make our button with the button text equal to my button. And then we get my button showing here. And we are able to change it up like that. Very good questions. Do I need to review any other part of those, or do we have any other questions of how would you do this thing?
I think most of it for me is just making sure I'm following the correct variable name,
Mm-hmm.
like passing stuff between state and whatnot. But this makes it easier if we're just separating the back end and the front end, and I can see
Yep.
where the name is actually coming from.
Absolutely. Any? Yep, go for it, Terry.
So what happened if you get like a type error and it says cannot read properties of undefined reading map?
Yeah, so the problem there is table is expecting data to get passed in as a prop. But if I come up here and casually forget to pass in the data here, and I just say, hey, I would like a table, you will see we get cannot read properties undefined of reading map. Because what's happening is the table is coming down here and it's like la-di-da-di-da, a table head, table body. Oh, I need to go loop over that data. That data is coming in as a prop up here. The problem is table up here does not have that prop on it. So map does not know how to handle that. So you could either add that data back in, right? Or one other thing you could do is you could come up here and say, if there is not data, return no table data to show. And now we still get our make and model of the data that's in there, but we don't even show the make and model table at all if the prop is not passed in. And we can put that back by just throwing the data of the cars back in, and that makes it show up. Other questions?
Yeah, I have a question like specifically about the syntax for table. So
Mhm.
like I understand what it's doing, but like table is like would you refer to it as like a component or a
A
hook or
custom component.
okay. And then data would be like its variable,
It's a prop.
a prop. Oh, okay, okay.
And
Can you
then
say what the prop is again?
a prop is like a parameter for a component. It is the input of what we send into the component.
Okay. And then the prop will have information from cars, and cars is that data we made,
Cars is a variable
the
that
variable.
is an array of objects that have key value pairs. The
Okay.
values happen to be strings. And we would say that cars is not only a variable, but it is also the value of the data prop. Just like this array is the value of the other data prop in the second component.
Okay.
I think that's every buzzword I can think
Cool.
of in terms of terminology to throw in there.
That's
But
helpful because that gives me like a better way to like talk about it and understand it. Because I can understand the logic, but like to put in the words to it and like because I like thinking words, I guess. So it's like
yeah,
I
no,
need
no,
to
no.
know
And that's
names
a,
of
a
things.
really good exercise, right? We would call this the prop or the prop name, and then this is the prop value.
Thank you.
Yeah. And React terminology is kind of tough, right? Because it's like you're mixing the HTML with the JavaScript and then adding in React principles that aren't entirely HTML and aren't entirely JavaScript, right? So that gets even more confusing when you're like, okay, is .map a HTML thing? No, definitely not. Is it generating HTML? Yes, but .map itself is not HTML. Is .map React or is .map JavaScript? Well, .map is a JavaScript function, right? You can map over an array in JavaScript without needing React. So it is JavaScript, but then we use it more in React because we take what it is mapping over, take the results of that, and React knows how to show that. So if we did it as a for loop, it would be a lot clunkier, right? The thing with those curly braces, these inline curly braces here, we can't put multiple lines of code there. So if we did a for loop and did those curly braces, there would be multiple lines of code. But this is technically all one JavaScript statement, even though it spans multiple lines of code, because we can put it all together, we can kind of cheat and use map to get away with looping over something to generate out multiple things. Other questions?
I got when, if ever, would we want to send the instead of wrapping the array that we're sending from like the data that's in the back end, like instead of like wrapping it, we send all the data in the array to the front end and then throw it in an object from there.
Yeah, we can do that.
Like what would be the benefit or downside to doing that?
The downside to it is that if you go, oh crap, I actually need to send back this other piece of data, you now need to go update the front end to say, oh, I'm sending back an object with two pieces of data in it. Compared to if you just put it in an object in the first place, the front end would just ignore the other data that's inside of it. But if you wanted to, you could server
Like
dot
take out books and
Yep.
just do await book find all.
Yep. So if we look, that's now going to crash this or give us an infinite loading. But if we look in the books request at the response, you see that it's just an array now. So what we can do instead in home is take out the .books, and instead we're working with just the data, and that puts us back to functioning completely fine. The downside to that is if I have it like this and I'm like, oh, I also need to send false because the library's closed, or we're not accepting new books for checking out, or if the library caught on fire. I don't know. I can't throw false in here, right? But if I do have it in an object and put that back on the front end as well, now I can say fire true, and it won't break anything on the front end, even though it's now getting that new variable called fire, or the new key in the object called fire. The front end's like, I don't pay any attention to fire, so it doesn't matter. Compared to if we had that in an array, we wouldn't be able to just add that thing in. And sometimes when you're building your own API, you don't control the front end code, right? You may be working with another company and they're expecting the data to come back as an array. And if you need to update it to an object, you now need to communicate, hey, this is when I'm deploying it. Here are the changes that will be made. Compared to if it's an object, chances are their code will just ignore any of the data that they're not looking for. So that's why we usually future-proof ourselves by putting everything we send back in an object. But it is certainly not a requirement of JSON or Express or a node server.
Gotcha. That's helpful.
Other questions? Going once? Going twice? Okay, let's get our search results working. So I'm going to do this. I guess we can make the data just show up on the homepage. I'm going to add in my homepage. I'm gonna comment out my table, but I will leave it there just in case you guys want to go back and reference that code. I am going to come here and I'm going to make an input with a type of text, and a placeholder of search, ... And I will throw this in its own form, the button type submit. The reason why I like putting things in a form is that it makes the enter button work. So if you did a button and just added the on click right to the button, you wouldn't be able to type in, hit the enter button, and have it actually execute the search. So the benefit of doing the button type submit and then doing a form on submit is that enter button does work. So we'll say search, say form on submit, search. And we're going to put the whole form tag inside of that. Then we need to make our const search, which is going to get the event. And it is going to event default. And the last thing we need to do is add an ID of search text on this. So when we are up here, we can say our search text is going to come from our event target elements search text dot value, and we'll console log the search text to make sure that we got that content. So I get my little search bar up here. I'm going to type in CLEAN. I'm going to click over and hit the search button, and I get clean coming out of my console. So I am able to access what gets typed in. From here, I now need to make an API call. Now, you may be tempted to use .filter on the front end. You may say, hey, I only have 10 books right now, right? So just loop over all of them, figure out what books include it on the front end, and show those results. In fact, let's try and do that first, and then see how we can implement it in the database second. So this front end approach works well if you only have, I don't know, a couple hundred things on the page. It's pretty easy for the computer to filter through that small number of items. It shows that no problem. But when you get to the point where you have thousands or tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of items in your database, all of a sudden the front end isn't really built up for filtering through all those items. But a database is. A database is really, really efficient at doing a query and only returning the data that you want. So two different ways of doing it. You can filter on the front end, which is fine for small items, or you do a full stack solution and do a search in your query on the back end. We're going to do it both ways here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, hey, the results are going to come from me going to my books. Where are my books coming from? They're getting set into books from my API call. So here I can say my books are going to be filtered, and we're going to get each individual book. And we're going to say if the book title includes my search text, or the book author includes my search text, return true, else return false. Then I am going to say, take my, set my books to my results. Now I come over here I type in clean and I hit search, and the only book that comes back is clean code. Okay, pretty cool. Two problems with this. If I search for clean in lowercase, no books come back. Well, that's because includes is case sensitive. So there are two ways we fix that. We tell it, hey, take the title and make it lowercase. Also do that to the author. And finally, lowercase the search text as well. So now it doesn't matter what they actually typed in. All the things we're searching for are in lowercase. All the things that we typed in are lowercase, even if it has capital letters in it. So now we can type in clean in lowercase and still get our book back. And just to show that it's working, we can do a search for Max, and we get both of my books that show up. Okay, that's pretty cool. The problem that I run into is when I delete this out and hit search again, now where did all of my books go? Well, the problem is when I set my books, I overrode all the results. I don't want to do that. So I have two fixes to this. I could go make another API call to go get the books and set them all back in, but that seems a little hacky, right? We already got that data once. I don't want to have to get that data again. So what we can do is we can say, hey, we're going to add another thing into state. And that thing is going to be search results and set search results. Both are going to come from use state. Then we come down here and we say, if there is search text, then go do all of this work, but set the search results to the results. If there is not search text, if we've cleared it out, else set search results to null. Basically clear out the search results. Then there's one last thing we need to do. Down here, we are going to say, loop over the search results if they exist, or if they don't exist, use the books instead. Hopefully this works. We'll say intro and hit search, and we get introduction to algorithms. And if we clean this out and hit search, we get all of our books back. Okay, pausing there for any questions that you guys may have on that.
I might have a question, but later. I'm scouring my capstone code because I did it a different way.
Okay. You can always Command Shift F and then type in like includes if that's the word you use for the algorithm, or .filter to see if that gets you where you're looking.
Yes, I used .filter. I did something similar. I used a use effect to monitor the when the search function was, or the search input was changed.
Yep, we can do that. That's actually a good thing to show. So if we comment out the um how do I want to do that? The other way we can do that is I'm gonna copy this and I'll call it live search. This approach, though, we do need to do it in state. And then need to set that up in state. Someone's going to tell me input it has 1T, aren't they?
Hold on.
Inputted. No, I spelled it right. Did I? I don't know. Someone can correct me if I'm wrong. Okay. Then what we can do, this is another way of doing it. We can do a use effect here. And what we're used to seeing all the time is this empty array, right? And we go, oh, that's only going to run when the page first loads. Well, if we put something in there, this will run, this will effectively run when this is changed. So any variable that changes in that array, the effect will run because it has changed. So we can say inputted search here, and then we can say, oh, good to know. Thank you, Joe. Then we can say, go do all of this stuff whenever the inputted search changes. Except this is going to now be inputted search. And it's mad at line 80. So now with the live search without the search button there, we can type in PR. Oh, no, we can't. Inputted search, set search results, set all. Inputted search, set inputted search, and target value. Should have worked. Okay, so it's tied to state properly. Inputted search, filter of the book, set search results, otherwise set it to null.
Here, I can include mine. But I think there's something. Well, you set yours into a variable.
Oh, you know what? I didn't too lowercase it. There we go. So now as you type, it filters it down. This is a different way of doing it. Either way is totally fine. Just depends, do you want that search button or not? When you're doing it on the front end, this is definitely a cleaner way of doing it. But when you have to make that API call and actually send the data to the backend to filter through it, then the search button makes a little bit more sense.
Oh, so you're not making like 20 calls.
Yeah, there's something called debouncing, which basically says like wait a certain number of seconds to make sure that you don't redo it over and over. So debouncing is a principle you use to like not make the live search happen on every letter press, only make it happen after 500 milliseconds of the user not typing, which would still mean it would type on every letter press for my parents. But other than that, debouncing is a principle that you can use for that. Okay, any questions on either approach? Okay, so the last one we'll do is the API call. And again, this is better if you have a lot of data. So I'm going to say search API. And I will say const search API. Still going to get the event. I'm going to borrow this and this. And instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say const data equals await my make API call, which is a function we made yesterday. I do need to make this async. And we are going to say /search, and we will make it a post, and we will pass in the search text. And we can wrap this around our if statement as well and say, if there is search text, then go make this API call, else set search results back to null. Now we got to go make this search work. So we're going to switch over to our backend. We will server.post to a search, be our async recres. Then we will res.send our books, which will come from await our book dot find all, where and we'll just make this work on title for now. The title is, and we do this thing a little, well, let me look this up. It's called an I like. And what it stands for is case insensitive. So if we jump to I like in the documentation, we see it is case insensitive, and this only happens to work in Postgres. Otherwise, you have to get into regular expressions, which are really powerful pattern matchers, basically. So what we'll do here, the percent sign means any text can come before it, and then we'll put another percent sign at the end that means any text can come after it. So we'll say where the title, and in order to get access to that, we have to say op, which comes in from sequelize.ilike, again for insensitive like, and it is going to be like a percent sign on either side with our rec.body dot search text.
And this is in replacement of 2 lowercase or 2 uppercase.
I like is doing the same thing as 2 lowercase.
I think I like lowercase and uppercase better.
Saw that one coming from a mile away. And then we will set the search results based off of the data.books here and see where this blows up terribly. So I go here and I say code and hit search, and we get the 3 books with code in it. And then if we take that out and hit search again, it takes us back. So I will just update this placeholder that says API search instead. Again, 3 different approaches of making search work. If you only got 10 books in your list, there's nothing wrong with doing it live typing or by making it a form submission. But as you get up to having thousands of items in your database, there are 2 things you want to do. You want to think about switching over to search so it's processing through the database query. But the other thing you want to think about is, hey, I probably don't want to show all 1,000 books in my database all at once, right? So you get into something called pagination or pagination, which is basically saying, hey, I've got 1 of 10, right? And I can go to page 2 or page 3. That's another thing that you can build out when you start getting more data.
I got a question about the 3 search types. So
Yeah.
let's say you didn't do like a full word, just like a string of letters or characters. Will that work in any of these searches too?
All 3 of them will. So if I do LEA, I get clean code. If I do, if I clear that and do LEA, I get clean code. And then same here, LEA, clean code.
Okay.
And just to say, if I just do don't, I get you don't know JS, just to prove that it's not just the first one it's working on.
What if you do EANC?
No problem.
No, with the no space.
Oh,
That's not
the
going to do
space
it, right?
will
Because there's
break it.
no trim. Yeah.
Well, that would break even if you put a trim in. Trim will only take leading or trailing spaces off. That is not a leading or trailing space.
Oh, for the entire string.
Correct.
Gotcha. I didn't know that was a thing. What is that for? When you're concatenating things into like an array?
No, if you did something like LEANC and someone put a space there and they're like, well, I expect clean code to come out. Well, because that space is there, it's not making it come out. So in your live search,
So you'd need to do like a regex to locate spaces if you wanted to do it that way, right?
correct.
Okay.
or a dot replace all and replace all spaces on both the search and on the inputted text. Now you're getting into search algorithms, but
So if you, I mean, I like 2 lowercase and 2 uppercase because it looks cleaner. Other than what we just talked about for like regex stuff, is that typically what people go with for? Because it's not changing anything else, right? It's, I mean, it's compatible with all data types because it's on the React side of things, right?
2 lowercase actually only works with strings, but because the input type is text, it's getting a string no matter what.
Gotcha.
Yeah, you can't do like a dot includes on an object, right? So you need to write your algorithm just like I had to do here. I couldn't just say if book dot includes inputted search. I had to break that out and say, well, no, look at the title and at the author, and if either one of them matches. You could do that the same over on this query. You'd have to use an op or, and you could say if the title is like this or the author is like this, that's fine. It just depends on, you know, how many rows of data are you really dealing with. Oh, and I'm going back to your question. Is it better to make a search component and pass the data as a prop, or make the search each time? If you have something that's reusable for search, it does make sense to move it out into its own component, but you do have to be careful there because you need to get the results of the search query and pass them up to the state that may be in a parent component. So moving it into its own component is cleaner, but it does depend on how much data you need to pass around in order to make that search work.
Right. I would just need to pass the object name and then the state name, right?
Yeah. And the set functions for them if you needed to update them. Which sounds easy, but can get tedious. Especially if your search algorithm changes across those components. Okay. Anyone else have other questions here? Anything I can add to this project? Any concept that I can go over and re-explain? Anything that you would like to see done? Anything in your capstone that you don't know how to do that we can just throw in here as an example? Austin.
One thing that I was thinking of, so the library and everything, you can check out the same book twice and it shows up twice in the list.
Cool.
Is
Let's
it,
do that.
is there a way to like do it so it's like you already have this book?
Yep.
Okay.
So in our post checked out, what we're going to do is we're going to say const already checked out, and we will do an await of the checked out table and find one where the rec.body matches up. Well, that rec.body has the user ID and the book ID. So in here, what we can do is we can say if it is already checked out, res.send error else, then create the checked out book and send back, I don't know, success true. The problem is if we do this, I will say I'm checking out for me and I check out clean code and it says you've checked this out. And if I go to my checked out books, ooh, that's interesting. I done broke it. If I pick me and I check it out, I go to checked out books. Oh, I broke my checkout. Find one. I think this needs a where. Always forget the where. Okay, try that again. Me, pragmatic programmer, you've checked this out. Okay, now I'm checking it out. But if I go back here, it's going to tell me I checked it out again, but it's going to prevent me from checking it out a second time. So what I need to do is, in addition to putting this error message here, I need to tell the front end, hey, check to see if there is an error, and if there is an error, show it. So what we can do is, when we go back to our home and we find the checkout item, what we're going to do is we're going to say result, and then we'll say if result dot success, then show this. Otherwise, alert whatever the result dot error is. So that's a good note, that we can't just send data back. We do need to tell the front end, hey, go process that. So now, if I go back to my home page and I check out clean code, I forgot my await. And now my backend is crashed. No, it hasn't. Need an async because it is await. Okay, now if I check out as me clean code, it says I already have it. And if I check out another item, it says you've checked this out. And sure enough, I now have all three of them. Does anyone want to see returning a book? Is that helpful to see that flow? Or do you guys think you could do that? Take that as I think you guys can do that.
I would say that would just be a delete from the database, right?
Correct. When to await connect to DB. You're getting into some sequelized voodoo dark magic there.
From Nathan.
Okay, so the reason why I am grumbling over here is because in db.js, you have seen this connect to DB over and over again, right? This is not standardized. This is not something that SQLize just tells you, like, here, write this function and it should work, right? So the problem that you will run into here is, because we call connect to DB, but it isn't awaiting that connection to the database, you can get into trouble sometimes that your API server will turn on before the database actually has connected. Well, if the database hasn't connected, it can't sync in your models. Well, if the models haven't been created, it can't seed the data into those models or into those tables. So oftentimes you will see something in connect to DB that is a little bit more intricate, that has something that will say, hey, go connect to the database. And if it doesn't work, wait 15 seconds, then go connect from there. And if it doesn't work after 15 seconds, exponentially back off until you've retried it 5 times and we'll just give up on connecting at that point. So the way that we are seeding the database, the way that we are syncing our models in, the way that we are starting up the API server before a database connection may be established isn't the most production safe environment. But based off of how small our APIs are and our DevOps flows at this point, this isn't a terrible approach. And it gets very complicated to explain the code, understand the promises, all of that kind of stuff. So yes, this isn't the best approach, and actually Ryan has been championing the a different ORM for the past 2 cohorts. Last cohort he was pushing for type ORM, which I ended up using in a work project, but didn't want to do because it is very TypeScript heavy. And their documentation is very hard to understand if you use type ORM in vanilla JavaScript. So that's the reason why we haven't switched to that. He did just send me another one a week or 2 ago that does handle database connections better. It handles seeding data better, and it handles what we call migrations, which is basically an explicitly written script for modifying the table. Which is very powerful and a part of database administration for a full stack developer or a database engineer. So type SQLize is not the be all end all. It is probably, if not the most popular, one of the most popular ORMs, but it is getting a little old. They do have new versions coming out in it, and it is possible to see data and write migrations and do all of that in SQLize. But they kind of work as plugins or additional things you need to build out, compared to type ORM, and the one Ryan mentioned, which I don't have off the top of my head, that has all of that kind of works out of the box. So all things to consider, if you were to use SQLize in your next project, there are other ORMs out there that you could consider. Why not import after db.sync? Can you even do that? Import what? Import the models up here? Yeah, then there's nothing to sync into the database.
What's causing it to get tripped up then? The actual model.js?
It's normally the seeding that trips it up. And
Oh.
that's why you have to await on the sync. If you don't await on the sync, it will try and create rows in models that may have been modified.
Oh, so the await. So, all right. So we either do await db.sync or just do db.sync and then await the whole component down at the bottom. Are those the two options there?
No, you have to await the sync.
Okay. Nate did it a different way when we were doing, I don't remember what project it was. We were messing around with stuff and then he put an await in front of the connected.db.
What I've done in the past is in my index.js, I've seeded the data right down here, where basically I've said when the server is online, go check to see if there's a user. The problem with that is the db.js may not be done the sync. So by awaiting the sync and then seeding the data after the sync is complete, it is a little bit safer. What this does not fix, though, is what happens if the API server turns on and there's a request that comes in immediately before the database is done connecting. And so you will get an error message there that you're trying to query the data that isn't connected to the database. So I don't really solve for that here because if you start up your API server and the database doesn't connect, there's a very good chance that it is not going to connect after a couple seconds. So you can get into error handling with that and try catches and all kinds of things. But I have found that this is the right balance between it works out of the box. You can add in the DevOps of connecting it to a different fly database, and you can get seeding and alter working in this situation. So I've just found this is the easiest way to work with models. No, because this is not a wait. So when it's importing here, it starts the import from db.js, but this is running in the background because it is asynchronous. So because of that, these requests will happen. And Node doesn't always, depending on what Node version you're in, it won't support a top level await. I don't know if, yeah, so I'm on a new enough version of Node that I can put await there and it's fine. But it used to be up until newer versions of Node and JavaScript as a whole, you couldn't use await unless there was async and it was in an async function. So there would be no way to await connected DB.
So is it safer for more, I mean, until more browsers opt in, or are all browsers using the most updated version of?
Not all browsers are, but this code would never run in a browser. because it's on the server.
Right. Okay, that makes more sense. I think I was confusing index.js and db.js, and makes more sense.
Yeah, where it gets hairy is you're doing an import, but it's awaiting in the import. So does the import finish running before it moves on to the next imports? I think it does, but Ryan or Nathan would be the right ones to ask about that. They know way more about Node and JavaScript than I do.
You could theoretically write the db.js right into index.js, right?
You could.
Before you make any server calls.
You could. Other questions? Okay. Let's get a little bit more of that how to adulting in, unless anyone else has questions that they would like answered. You totally can work on your capstone. Actually, let's do attendance before I let you guys go. Attendance word tonight is checked out. As in you checked a book out of the library. One word or two, doesn't matter. We just talked about credit scores, right? I don't think we touched on finances yet.
Right. Yeah, I believe we went. You went on to talking about freezing credit.
Yes. Super important to do if you have not done that already. Okay, so if you would like to drop out, you are more than welcome to go work on your capstone. If you have any questions, you're welcome to pop back in here or shoot me a question, shoot me a message on Slack, and I can let you know when I'm done with this. Wednesday and Thursday are likely to be capstone work days as well. So I will be here for any questions if they pop up or any things to review. But if you would like to go work on your capstone, you are welcome to do that. Otherwise, I'm going to run through these things, talk about finances for a couple slides, organization, things I wish I knew sooner, and entrepreneurialism are on the list for tonight. So if any of those are interesting to you, you are welcome to stick around. You are also welcome to turn off your camera and just listen in and kind of multitask on your capstone and these slides, whatever floats your boat.
Can I get the link? I thought I had it starred in my Google
Ye-
Drive, but I don't.
Um, oh. I just threw it in Slack, so you are welcome to use that.
Thank you.
Joe, I may take you up on that offer depending on how quickly we get through these slides. I'm boring. I get the same thing every year. Okay, finances. So money is a terrible master, but an excellent servant. What does that mean? Well, it's a P.T. Barnum quote. Greatest Showman is awesome, by the way. Okay, so, aside from that, if money is running your life, it is going to ruin it, right? If you feel like money is the master of you, you are going to hate every day of your finances. But if you are in control of your money, you are choosing where you are spending your money. It is an excellent servant, meaning it will work for you. What do I mean it will work for you? Well, if you invest it and invest it well, that interest is going to grow, right? That money will work for you. Or if you are making important financial decisions like valuing your money and spending money in the right places, it will also work for you. Meaning, great, now that I got my finances under control, I'm going to go invest in a phone because I know that's going to be important for my application development. Well, now that is money working for you. It is no longer money in your pocket or in your bank account, but it's working for you another way. It's providing value based off of where you've invested that, whether it is an actual cash investment, whether it is a stock investment, or whether it is something that you are purchasing and using and growing off of it. So where do you start with finances? Really important to create a spreadsheet of your financial snapshot. Doesn't matter if you have one account or 10 accounts, right? Creating something that has the account type, the name of the bank that money is with, the account number, the current balance of it, things like I think I have any debt that you may have, whether it is a personal loan or a mortgage, a credit card loan, a student loan. And then you also want to include the balance, the monthly payment amount, and the payoff date. Why is all of this important? Well, you may think you may have all of your accounts in your head, but being able to go to one spreadsheet and see all of that data in one place, it should be very sobering for you to say, hey, I actually can see my entire financial picture. I know I've got this much in savings and I owe this much. The other reason is it is important, and I don't know, we may get to these slides later on. I don't know where they are, is what happens if something happens to you and you're in a coma in the hospital? What happens if you die, right? Someone's got to be able to come in, your executor or healthcare proxy, and say, hey, where is this person's money? What do I need to do? And so having a secure spreadsheet with all of that account information is a really important starting point for your loved one to come in and help either, in a time where you're not able to do it, or something a little bit more dark like your death. Include any checking, savings, and retirement accounts. We will get into retirement accounts in a second, but IRAs, individual retirement accounts, are the most popular. I'm a big fan of Roth retirement accounts because I would much rather pay my taxes now than on all of the growth over time. Roth versus traditional is a big argument, but just my personal take on it. And then consider making a budget. Mint is now unfortunately shut down by Intuit, so you can't use that. YNAB stands for You Need a Budget, which is a really popular tool. And then you can always do a spreadsheet, right? But having some one document that has a summary of all of your accounts, really beneficial. Joe.
This is actually the question that I had. I use Rocket Money right now. I used to use Mint before it got shut down. What services other than Rocket? They don't have like a proper budgeting feature that like Mint had.
Yeah,
So
YNAB is kind of very divisive. That's not the word I'm looking for. You either love it or you hate it. You Need a Budget makes you work backwards from your money. So they say, okay, you're gonna get paid $1,000 this week. Just throwing a number out there. Where is that $1,000 going to go? And so they kind of make you work backwards and say, hey, my rent is X amount a month, so $250 of that needs to go to my rent. Compared to most traditional budgeting softwares, they will say, well, here are all of your transactions across debit, credit, even manual entry of cash things. Categorize that, and we can show you where your money went. Financial experts like Dave Ramsey, and he's got an app called Every Dollar, I think. He says, And the way YNAB works is instead of taking how you're spending your money and categorizing it, you should take your income and work backwards to see what you can allocate towards those categories. So every dollar in YNAB are worth looking at. Other people just use a spreadsheet and that works totally fine for them. But the idea here is that a budget is going to show you not only where you're spending your money, but also set up goals to keep each one of those categories in check. The human brain can't hold, oh, I made $1,000 and I only spent 800 of it. Okay, that's great, but what was your plan for spending that money and did you stick to it? So it doesn't matter that you're just saving money, it matters where you're spending money, and that's the argument for making a budget.
I don't know if you have the chat up.
Oh,
I have or working on ironing out all the details to a 5-year financial plan for, at least ballpark with where I'm gonna be mostly deciding like large purchases, like gearing up for, purchasing a home, etc.
yep.
Is that something that you can do in those apps, like set far-reaching goals to hit? That was something that you could do in Mint that I really liked, but I can't find. I don't immediately see anything and you need a budget, but it looks like I can kind of maybe finagle it with replacing debt with that goal. Like that's the debt that I'm working towards.
Yes. Yeah. I'm pretty sure you can do that and you need a budget. I have not used every dollar, but I do know Dave Ramsey is big on his like 7-step program, which is paying off debt all the way through investing into your retirement and donating money at the end of it. So his 7-step program, I don't fully agree with, but you can look at that for like broader goals. He's got a whole order of how you should pay off debt and how you should start saving money. I personally use a spreadsheet for my finances, and I basically have the interest rate, the maturity date, the rough balance, and the monthly payment. And then I add up that monthly payment, and that's how I kind of come up with my budget. So it isn't a traditional budgeting approach, but it is what works for me. And then from there, I can look at my current monthly expenses, my monthly income, and then I set goals based off of that, right? So one of my goals is have my car paid off. And I just open my spreadsheet and it says I'm 27 months away from getting the car paid off, right? So I kind of I don't want to call it a pyramid system, right? But start with the biggest, the number of accounts, right? All the different places I owe money, and then keep on going up a level of, all right, sum all of those expenses up, compare that to my income. Okay, now that I've set that and I know how much money I have to play with, where can I throw the extra money? And then from there, I set the highest level goals, which I only have, 4 of. But they're the biggest things for me to hit.
Do you do you have a model for that, like a blank model for your spreadsheet? That's usually the problem that I run into when using spreadsheets is like I get lost in like how should I lay this out?
I can share it with you after I delete out the information. Everyone's a little different, which is totally fine. But I find just like forcing you to enter that information and go like, what are my monthly expenses, right? What is my National Grid bill? And oh, I've got that student loan that I owe money on. How much is that costing me? And to go from there. And then the last thing I will say is budgets and financial pictures are not the same thing, right? So a budget is everything that we're talking about of how am I spending my money? What are the goals of spending that money? A financial picture is where is all of my money? What are the different account types? All of that kind of stuff. Any questions on that? Okay. So fully understand that some of this is like, well, I'm not making any money, so none of this makes sense for me to do right now. Okay, that's fine. I understand that. But when you do start making money, it is important to recognize a couple things. Not all debt can be paid off with your current income level. That is a truth, right? And a lot of people are going to stress out and go, oh my God, I'm not making enough money. I'm never going to get out of debt. Well, no, you should be paying off hopefully some of your debt, right? If figure out what the highest interest rate is, or you can use something called the snowball method, which is how you prioritize what debt you pay off first. But it is futile to stress over something you can't do anything about, right? You will get promotions, you will get better jobs, right? You will eventually start making more money. When that happens, every time that happens, you should take a step back and go, how does this impact my budget? How does this impact what loans I'm paying off? What can I do to take that extra money that I'm making and throw it at a loan or throw it at an investment or a retirement account so I can make that money work for me? But until that happens, until you have those extra dollars that you can allocate towards getting to a better, healthier financial situation, don't stress about it. That loan is still going to stay there, right? If you can only make minimum payments, you can only make minimum payments on it. If you can't make minimum payments on it, okay, right? But it is important to be realistic and say, hey, I may not be in a situation to enable this, but I still want to have a plan. So when that money does come in, when I do get the promotion, when I do get my first job, I've got a game plan to allocate that money towards a better financial health. Don't forget to adjust your financial picture when you do start making money. Watch out for consumerism, right? And this is a major problem in America and a lot of other first world countries. You make money, so you think you have to spend money. And all of a sudden, you've got 100 Amazon orders over the year, and you've got the money, and you just go, oh, I need a new whatever. And so you just go out and you buy it. That sounds like it wouldn't happen to you until all of a sudden it does, right? So be careful. Say, hey, do I really need this? Do I really need to buy this? Is this something that I can wait on? Is this something I can even wait a month on and see if I find the need to use it again? And if I do, then I will buy it, right? But the second that you get into Amazon and Target and Walmart and everything shipped to your door, it is scarily easy to buy something new compared to the way that we were wired to work 20 years ago, which was, well, if I need something, I got to go to the store. I got to navigate around the store to find it. And chances are I don't really need it that badly. So maybe I won't get it. So just be careful on buying things just because you have money. Americans have more credit card debt than any other country in the world. And there is a reason for that. Americans actually have more credit cards, period, than anyone else in the world because very few countries have credit scores. China actually just started a national system a couple years ago for credit scores. But other than the US and Canada, maybe Australia, most countries don't have credit scores, which is really interesting. And they use debit cards a lot more than they use credit cards. Just a little fun fact for you. But throwing that out there, watch out for consumerism. Okay. Taxes. I don't know why they don't teach this in school. Drives me absolute crazy. But file your taxes every year. Now you may be every year that you are above 18. Why is this important? You may think, oh, I didn't even work a job, or oftentimes lower income residences, families, individuals will qualify for more tax credits and incentives. There may be a refund available to you that you have no idea that you are eligible for if you don't file your taxes. So you can file your taxes up to 3 tax years past. So that means that 2024 we can't file yet, which means now you can file 2023, 2022, and I believe 2021. It depends if you're before or after April 15th. there could be refund money sitting available for you, sometimes up to several $1,000s, and have no idea that it is available for you. The only way to find out is to file your taxes. I use TurboTax. You can use whatever program you want. I recommend using a program or using the IRS e-file, which is a new program that's available directly from the IRS. TurboTax is only like $30. I've used it every year since 2007, I think. So I obviously like them a lot. There are things available to file your taxes, but it is an absolute must to file your taxes every year. Yes, Terry.
Even like you don't like have like a job or anything like that, you still have to like file for it.
So if you make under $13,850 as an individual, you are legally not required to file. But the IRS is also legally not required to notify you that you are eligible for a refund, even if you only made $13,850. So if you have any income, I highly encourage you to file your taxes. If you don't have any income, there may still be a tax credit that's available to you. Chances are there isn't, but if you have any income whatsoever, I encourage you to file. Or have children, even if you don't have income, you can be eligible for a credit over there as well. Oh, and I take it back. No, you should file even if you don't. If you are eligible for the stimulus payments during the pandemic, and you didn't get them, you can get that refund if you file your taxes and have no income. So there are reasons to file even if you don't have income.
Yeah. I have my like stimulus before, and I didn't file this year. I think did I do I don't think I did last year neither because no, I think I no I did no I did do last year. I did do last year.
Yeah, so the IRS e-file is now like a free program. And it probably only takes you 30 minutes to fill it out. So worst case scenario, you fill it all out and go, oh, I'm not eligible for anything, but at least you will have filed it. Because if you don't do it by April 15th, it becomes a little bit harder to file for past years. Like the software, you have to get a different version of the software basically, which gets complicated. But it's also important to have your returns filed because if you apply for credit or even like a new apartment, they may say, hey, we want a copy of your tax returns to show how much income you reported. Well, now they may ask for 2 years, and if you didn't file it that year, now you have to go back and file an old return, and that makes it even harder. So it is a good idea to file it, even if you don't owe anything, even if you're not going to get a refund, even if it's $0, still file it, still submit it to the IRS, and keep a copy of it. So if you do need it, you can always pull it up and say, look, I filed it. I had zero income this year, but at least I generated it and filed it, and the IRS has it. Joe.
Just a question on tax brackets in New York State.
Yeah.
I remember running into an issue probably when I was like 18, when I ended up needing to, or maybe I was younger than that. Anyway, I ended up needing to pay the state because they only tax the first, or they don't tax the first 100, or it was like taxed at such a low rate that I ended up owing them money
Okay.
or something. I don't know if it was like, maybe it wasn't a tax bracket then, because that's usually static and you don't owe for that. Maybe it was just like a tax incentive or something for single filers. I'm not exactly sure.
Yeah. So, well, there's also the standard deduction as well, right? So saying you don't owe any taxes on the first whatever $1,000 you make. So there's that. There's also something where, you know, ideally, if you have your withholding set up properly, every time you get paid, a little bit of that paycheck is getting sent to the state or to the federal government.
That's what I
saying,
end up doing.
I owe taxes, you know, I owe this amount, take it out of every paycheck. And then at the end of the year, if you overpay, ideally, slightly overpay, ideally, on your withholding, you get that money back when you file, right? Um, that gets harder to do when you start making more money, when you start having kids, when you start entering higher tax brackets, when you start qualifying for more credits, getting your withholding right becomes a lot harder. And so the two-way, you can either adjust your withholding with your employer. Every state has a different form name. It's the W4, W9, W4, I think. Yeah, W4 is the form you fill out to adjust your federal withholding. And then the form name is different in every state. But the good news is, even if you are wrong in your withholding and over withhold, you get that money back when you in your return. If you under withhold, though, you chances are will have to pay a penalty and owe that money at the time of filing your return.
They'll charge you a penalty for it
Yes,
at the state level or the federal level or
both. You get 1 year as an oopsie. You get 1 year to go, oh, sorry, I had my withholding wrong. Let me adjust that. But the second year, there's a 10% threshold. So if you withhold 90% of what you need to withhold, you don't pay a penalty. You still owe them money at the end of the year, but you don't owe a penalty on it. If you are more than 90% off, or I'm sorry, more than 10% off, and were off last year as well, you do owe a penalty on it.
When I mean that's calculated based on the information that you fill out, not what I usually did to compensate was I set aside an extra like $5 or $10 after every paycheck. You're not talking about that, though. You're talking about actually filling out like what information that I as a filer fall into, right? Like,
no, I'm
know,
talking about the W4. It is possible when you work multiple jobs, it's harder to fill out that W4. If you have exemptions that you're claiming for children, that impacts your taxes a lot. If you just pull up the W4 form, you can see there's step 2 there. And they did just change this form like 2 years ago. So if you fill this out right, you shouldn't owe any taxes, but it is possible to get your withholding wrong and end up owing money on it.
Right. I was talking more, I wasn't talking about any of the other steps. I was mostly talking about 4C that I adjusted. I understand that you can incorrectly calculate the rest of the form, but
yes.
Okay.
Yeah, that deductions, it's like if you expect to claim deductions other than the standard deduction, enter that amount here. So this is unfortunately not like I'm going to turn this into my HR department and they're going to tell me if I filled it out right or not. Withholding is one of those things, especially if you're working multiple jobs, that is really hard to get right. Because if you're working multiple jobs, your first employer may not know about the second employer. And so getting this dialed in is just hard.
You should be able to contact somebody at the IRS for this.
If you end up owing money when you file your return at the state or federal level, it is highly encouraged that you go back in and adjust your withholding to make sure you will not owe money for the second year.
Yeah, I think I've been within, I think I had to pay the past 2 years. I've gotten very, very close to like not owing and not getting paid back, like very, very close to zero.
Which is where you want to be, right? Like you don't want to get $1,000 tax bill, but you also don't want to get a $5,000 refund, even though that sounds great. That is now $5,000 that you're not making interest on, that you can't invest any of that until the following April 15th, right? So some people think getting a huge refund is great, but the IRS doesn't pay you interest on that.
Right. No interest-free loans to the IRS.
Right. So getting your withholding right is definitely important. Okay, last two things I will say because we are at break time. Scan in your W-2s, your 1099s, any tax forms that you receive. When you go to buy a house or when you go to open accounts, oftentimes you need those documents that were mailed to you. And if you don't have them scanned in, they can be a nightmare to find. So any tax form that you are filing, not to mention if you get audited from the IRS, they can go back up to 7 years and require those forms for you. So if you are filing your tax, well, just said everyone should be filing their taxes, but also scan in any of those forms that you get in the mail. Always make sure that your employer, your bank account, all of that information has your up-to-date address on them. Really easy for them to send a form to an old address and then go, oops, at the end of the year, forget to report that. Save your 1040, the form that you are filing with the IRS as a PDF. Don't just take the TurboTax file that got downloaded and call it a day, or the e-file one or whatever it is. That software, you may uninstall it from your computer. You may upgrade your computer. You may go online and try and get there and the business shuts down. And then you are screwed because that specific file format will not open. So whatever you file with the IRS, your Form 1040 and any other forms that are included with it, download it as a PDF and save it in a place that you know you can get to, even if that company goes out of business the next day. Backing up to the cloud is a really good idea. And the last thing I'll say before we go on break, many W-2s and 1099s are going digital now. So you do want to keep an eye on your spam inbox around end of January, early February, when most of those forms get sent out, because a lot of them are doing digital delivery now instead of sending it to you in the mail. So all things to be on the lookout for. Any questions before we go on break? Okay, go on break, be back at 7:25, and we will finish this up. I don't think I have too many more slides. Oh, do all of that. All right, I think this is the last section. A lot of this should be common sense, but still like to throw it out there. I like to think about organization, about how to feel like an adult, right? I joke that this is called How to Adult, but when you are organized, you just have a different perspective on life. When things pop up, doesn't mean you know how to do them. It doesn't mean that you're not stressed over them. It just means that you are organized enough to figure out how to lower that anxiety and really approach a problem. So organization is a super important thing to me. I have found a correlation between people who don't have successful careers and people who are unorganized. Are there successful unorganized people? Yes, absolutely. But there is something to be said about being able to find things, about knowing how to file things. Just organization as a whole, very, very important. So, digital organization. My biggest tip is use a password manager. How many times in your life have you had to hit the forgot password and go through the link and change it? Lots, right? And so if you use a password manager, I've not had to reset my password since I have started using a password manager. Every time that I create a new account, it is a totally randomized password that goes right into 1Password. And then whenever I need to sign into that, it autofills on my computer, it autofills on my phone. There's all kinds of security benefits with it. But I now have over 1,000 accounts sitting in my 1Password. It is my ride or die. I used Dashlane before that. There are a couple good alternatives. Apple just came out with their own. They had a crappy version of their own actually last year. Or a couple years ago, but this year they were supposed to make major upgrades to it in the macOS Sequoia update that just came out yesterday. So I don't care which one you use. I personally use 1Password. I've used Dashlane in the past. Check out the Apple one. I fully trust Apple security, but using a password manager, super, super important. My Google Drive is organized. I have a folder called Docs. I put the year 2024, and then whatever document I'm putting in there, I do a month, a year, and the name of the file. I think people over organize, or people have these mounds of paper that they feel like they need to save, but they also don't really want to keep that paper around. So anytime that I have something that I want to save, it gets scanned in. There are great scanner apps on your phone. I use one called Genius Scan. There is something also to be said about having an all-in-one printer that has a document feeder. Because if you've got a document that's like 20 pages long, it's going to take you a good 10 minutes to scan that in on your phone, position it, put your phone down, grab the next piece of paper, position it, all of that. You have a scanner, you put in 20 pages in that document feeder, and within a minute, every page will be scanned without any problems. So I'm a big fan of scanning in anything that I think I will have to save. I put it in Google Drive, so it is up on the cloud and backed up by Google. And then I either shred it or throw it in recycling. Don't want to shred absolutely everything. It's actually bad for the environment because they can't recycle shredded paper. The paper is a little too thin. Or a little too small for them to be able to recycle. So if it's got like a full social security number on it, all right, I'll shred it. But otherwise, I try and recycle it. Super simple. I will end up with 20 to 30 documents in this folder every year. That's all you really need to save. Other than that, it is recycle. I don't keep paper things around. I try and get everything as digital as possible. Scanning in any paper or mail, never have multiple copies of the same file or project. That is a big life lesson. If you need multiple copies of your code, you should be using Git. By the end of this, you should now be starting to get comfortable with branches, and being able to switch between branches as you're working on different features. I can tell you the clearest way to know that you are not organized digitally is if I go on your computer and you go, oh, I think it's in this folder. And then you go, oh, wait, no, I did it in Capstone-2. And then you open up Capstone-2 and you're like, oh, no, I got this working here, but this other feature is in Capstone-2-final-no-really this time. Don't have multiple copies. Not a good idea. Branches are fine in Git, but whether it's code or a regular document, don't have multiple copies. It always ends in failure. Use a digital backup. There are lots of cloud options out there: Google Drive, iCloud, Microsoft OneDrive, Dropbox. Those are all fine. Backblaze is one that I personally use. I think it's $129 a year. And it's unlimited storage, so it just backs up your entire hard drive. And if something goes wrong, you can just restore it right from there. It's not putting things in a particular folder. It's just if it's on your computer, it gets backed up. The last thing I will say is it is fine to back your computer up to a solid state drive or a traditional spinning hard drive. It is not okay to use a flash drive. Flash drives have much more volatile memory on them, which means one day you can plug it in and all of a sudden it will stop working. Solid state drives and hard drives have much lower failure rates. So if you think, oh, I'll just get a 128 gig flash drive and back my stuff up onto that, one day when you need that backup the most, you're going to pop that flash drive back in 2 years later, and it's just not going to open on your computer and it's just not going to recognize it. So be careful with flash drives. Solid state drives are totally fine if you would like to use them, or cloud backups. There's something in the Mac called Time Machine that will back up your whole hard drive. But again, back up to a solid state or a hard drive. Do not back up to a flash drive. Okay, any questions on that?
Yeah, I put one in chat.
Oh, thank you. Generate a password every time. Notes app can also scan. 321 is totally fine to use. I prefer my own organization system in Google Drive. Is 321 is that total backup or is that organization?
That's mean 3 copies of your data, use 2 different types of media for storage, and 1 copy offsite.
That is probably
Is that like overkill for personal use?
it may be overkill, yeah. Um and I would say that's probably even overkill in most cloud solutions now. Like I don't know that Google Drive is following 321 of your data. So probably overkill at this point. But the one of offsite storage is fulfilled by any cloud service that you use. The 2 types of storage, you could say that, one is backing up to a hard drive, and then the other one is, I mean, no one uses optical media anymore. You can get tape drives, but tape drives are super expensive and super slow, and only make sense at the commercial level. So I would probably say that, yeah, 321 is probably overkill in today's world, especially with solid state media and the failure rate being so low on them, and how cheap cloud storage has gotten. I would probably say it's overkill if you are backing up to 2 different clouds, or 1 cloud and 1 hard drive. I would say that is more than enough. But it depends, right? Are you talking about some super important file that if you lost it, you would lose your career's work? Or are you talking about, a tax bill that you already paid and you just wanted to keep it on file? Just depends. Okay. Important documents. This is super important, especially when you become a parent, or if you are already a parent, your kids will thank you. Get a fireproof safe. You do not need to spend $1,000 on it. You do not need a big gun safe. I have one that Wirecutter recommends that's like $100. Fireproof bags are not enough. If you have an actual house fire, that fireproof bag will last for barely a minute before it goes up. So getting a safe. It can be a small document safe. Again, you don't need a giant one. Really important that you keep this more organized than anything else. People love to shove shit in their safes that actually aren't important, right? So yeah, if you have jewelry or gold or stuff like that, yeah, that's fine. But a lot of people will go, oh, this is a bill I got to pay, or I can't forget about this, or this is a copy of my tax return. And they throw it in there, and all of a sudden the safe becomes crammed full with paper and crap that is just hard to use it. And then all of a sudden you won't have any more room in it. And you go, I got to organize my safe. No, you don't need to organize your safe. You just need to not put crap in there that doesn't need to be in there. What does need to be in there? Passport if you have it, passports for your family, birth certificate, social security cards, and if you own your car and have it paid off, your car title as well. I put an asterisk next to birth certificate and social security card because a lot of people don't have those documents. And at some point in your life, I promise you, you will need them. So be proactive on them. If you don't have your birth certificate or your social security card, super easy to get them replaced. Birth certificate's a little bit harder because you have to go to the hospital that you were born at. You can work with the state to get help on that if you don't know where that is. Social security card is much easier to get replaced, especially if you have a driver's license or a New York State ID card. That is a form you can fill out. You do have to mail it in. You cannot do it entirely online, but you don't have to go in person to the office unless you have a legal name change that you also need to get processed. With Real ID, this is becoming even more important. So if you are getting on a flight, you will either need a passport or a Real ID driver's license in the state. Well, you will need it from the state of New York, but to board any plane or to go into a nuclear facility, because I know that's on a lot of your guys' hobby lists for the weekends, you need a Real ID starting next spring, I believe. So that's something to put on your radar. But you cannot get your real ID unless you have your social security card and another form of ID, and I think your birth certificate. So if you don't have it, it is worth getting those documents. Ask your parents if you can. They may have them, they may give them to you. But if you cannot get them, it is worth proactively getting them because you will need them at some point in your life. And yes, I am aware how stupid it is that you need a card with literally 9 numbers typed on it with your name, but that is what is required for Real ID. Terry.
With the birth certificate, does like getting it replaced, would it like give you like a replacement of the original, or would it like just like a copy of your birth certificate?
It will be, and they will call it an official or a raised seal version of it. It's fine if it is a replacement. But if your parents, or if you have a birth certificate that's literally looks like it was like stuck in the photocopier and came out, that is not good enough. So you will want to get the replacement, and they will say it's a raised seal on it. And it's literally like a sticker or like pressed into the paper, and it will say like the name of the hospital, or it will say Onondaga County on it or something like that. It is okay to have a replacement one as long as it's an official replacement.
I put the links for Onondaga County's Division of Vital Statistics in the chat.
Thank you. Some states you have to go to the hospital. Some states or counties you have to go to the county. If it is the county, it's usually a little bit easier to do. And it's usually just a form to fill out, and you include a copy of your license and maybe one other thing. And then they mail it to you.
Yes, and they just updated their website.
Lovely.
So I don't have to go to like Brooklyn Hospital and just so I could get my okay.
The vast majority of them will do it by mail, because they realize that people move away. They may have like a specific form that you have to fill out, and some of them are dumb and they like don't have the form on their website, so you have to like wait for them to mail it to you, and then you mail it back to them, which is dumb. But you can always go. I think New York City, all 5 boroughs report into the one like Department of Vital whatever. So if you just Google replace New York City birth certificate, you will probably find the page you're looking for. And this obviously applies to the US. I am sure other countries, well, I know for a fact other countries have birth certificates, but important to have those IDs. Any other questions? Okay. ID cards, 2 things to consider. Real ID, I just talked about, important for getting on a plane. There's actually one step up in New York State and only a couple other states called an enhanced driver's license. It will let you get into Canada by land only. Enhanced is greater than real. Every enhanced license is a real ID license. So it literally is a tiered system of enhanced at the top, real in the middle, and then not for federal purposes is what they're calling the lower tier of it. I want to say enhanced is maybe $30 more. And it doesn't have many different requirements either for the documents that you have to show up with. But to get a real or an enhanced, you do have to go into the DMV. For the love of God, book an appointment before you go into the DMV. I promise you it will save you at least an hour of time. And they'll let you book like the next day as well. So book, I've found no difference between the 2 in Onondaga County up at North Syracuse or over it's not Camillus, but Tip Hill area, whatever that area is called. Either one is totally fine. Be proactive about this, because next spring there is going to be a rush of people who are crapping themselves realizing that they can't get on planes until they get their driver's license updated. So try and be proactive about it. If you do think you will be traveling to Canada at any point and have the extra $30, go for that. If not, a reel is totally fine. And I don't think there's any additional cost for a real ID, but you do need to bring in 2 proofs of address. It can be a utility bill, it can be a bank statement, it can be basically anything that has your full name on it, and your address is enough for the address verification. And if you already have a New York ID or driver's license, it fulfills a lot of your points requirements. But the New York DMV website has a really good tool that you can hit, like, figure out my supporting documents, and it will give you a whole list of things that you can check off to make sure that you have all the points and all the documents that you need before you go in there. So when you go into the DMV, all the forms are on the website. You can fill them all out in advance. The tool tells you exactly what documents you need without reading some other page and not knowing if it's enough. You can literally just check that stuff off, and make an appointment. Make an appointment, get your documents, get the right ID type, and don't wait to get it. And you do need your social security card, so make sure you have that before you go into the DMV for that kind of stuff. Tiffany, you asked a good question about global entry. I will circle back to that. It's actually a great line in the Beetlejuice movie about the new Beetlejuice, the second one, about global entry. Real ID or enhanced, get the enhanced if you can afford the $30, it's worth it. And then the other thing to consider is if your kids do not have an ID, you can get an ID for them that pretty cheap. I think it's like $12 or $15. While you may think, oh, why do I need an ID for my kids? Because you don't really need it if you fly with them. It makes your life easier because there is no other document other than their birth certificate that they can use for identification. And chances are no documents that have their photo on them. So if you are going to the DMV, take your kids with you, get a ID for them. It is super cheap. It will register them in the New York State system, and it will make their life easier when they get a full adult ID or driver's license. So something to consider. IDs for minors, not something that is standardly done in this country, but is a good idea to consider in case you ever need some official proof of ID for them. You have a photo ID that is state registered. I don't think you can get a real ID for a minor yet, but I'm not sure on that. May not matter, but still consider that. Okay. Tiffany, you asked a really good question. Is global entry better than enhanced? Global entry is in its own category with TSA PreCheck. So they are called TTP, Trusted Traveler Programs. The order that it goes is Nexus at the top, global entry underneath it, and then PreCheck, and then all the other people that fly at the airport and still have to take their shoes off when they go through security. If you fly once a year, I am telling you right now, PreCheck is worth it, or global entry or Nexus. You have no idea how easy it is to go through security. You don't have to take your shoes off. You don't have to take your belt off. You don't have to take your laptop out of your bag. You don't need to get your liquids out. I have gone through, I shouldn't be saying this on a recording, but I've gone through security with things I shouldn't have been able to get through security on. And because I had PreCheck, they were like, don't care, just go right on through. So, you're going to need a real ID or enhanced license, period. Doesn't matter if you have global entry or PreCheck, won't be able to get on a board or on a plane unless you have the enhanced or real ID, and a passport counts as real ID. So if you have a passport, you can use that to board and it's not a problem. If you get PreCheck, it is $85 for 5 years. And all that it does, $85 for all 5 years. It's not $85 each of those 5 years. So it covers you for 5 years. You can go to the Syracuse airport to do your interview, and your interview is like 10 minutes. Basically, as long as you don't say you're a terrorist, they give you PreCheck. Super easy to get. Global entry is the next step up. It's only $100, so $15 more for a pre-check. The catch is for global entry, you have to do it at a border crossing. So the Syracuse airport you can't do your interview for global entry there. You have to go over to Buffalo, up to the northern border, or I think any of the 3 New York City airports will probably do global entry as well, or you can go down to Philadelphia or Boston. So global entry is a little bit harder to get. But if you have global entry, you get pre-check included with it. And the benefit of global entry is it is a breeze to get into the country. Usually you don't even have to talk to a customs officer. You literally go up to a kiosk. It will either scan your eye or your fingerprint. You answer like 3 questions on the touchscreen. It prints out a little receipt. You go to a special line that's completely empty. You hand the little receipt over to the customs person, and you just walk into the country. It is lovely. It is a pain in the ass to get it for the first time because you do have to do it at an international airport or border crossing. But once you get it, it is a game changer. It doesn't help you getting into other countries, but when you get back to the US, it is, I'm telling you, the best experience. My sister-in-law is British. And so they fly over to the UK all the time. They said when they got back last month, it was an hour-and-a-half long wait in the customs line. They had 0 wait because all 4 of them had global entry. Yes, it is absurd that my 1-year-old niece had to go for an interview, hadn't spoken her first word, but had to go for an interview for global entry. Duh. What? But now that they have it, they said it has saved them hours and hours of waiting in line at the airport. So if you're eligible for it, if you have the $100, it covers you for 5 years. Go make a day trip out of it to Niagara Falls or go check out Toronto or but I will say the only downside to global entry is the processing times are super, super long. So once you fill out all of the paperwork, it takes like 6 months for them to get back to you. Then you can schedule your interview a month or 2 out. And then once you have it, it is a total breeze, especially if you do a lot of international border crossings. At least coming back into the US. So is it worth it for everyone? No, right? Pre-check is much easier to get. And I do think pre-check is worth it for anyone who flies once a year. If you are doing a lot of international border crossings, global entry is worth it. You do have to put in the upfront work to do all the paperwork and the interview and all of that stuff. But renewing it is super easy. You can renew it online. You don't have to fill out the full application again. You don't need to go back to an international border crossing. It is super easy to renew it, and it's just another $100 after that 5 years. There's one level above it, which is called Nexus. And Nexus is actually only $50 for 5 years. You can only get it at Canadian border crossings, so you can't get it down in New York City or Boston or anything like that. But it gives you all the benefits of global entry, all the benefits of pre-check, and gets you into Canada by just scanning a card. So you literally like drive right across the border and you don't have to talk to anyone. So if you're doing a lot of Canadian border crossings or you're already going to Canada to get your global entry, you might as well do Nexus instead. It is cheaper and it has all the same benefits of global entry and pre-check. But out of all of that, global entry does require a passport. Nexus requires a passport. And you are going to need Real ID. Even if you have Nexus or global entry or pre-check, you still need a Real ID to board a plane unless you have an alternative Real ID like a passport. Okay, that was a total rant. Hopefully I answered all your questions. Cool. Any other questions before we move on? Okay. Really morbid. Get ready to die. Everyone's going to do it. Never know when it's going to happen. So a couple things that you should have. I did write a blog post about this. I think I called it like make your executor not hate you. If you don't have a named executor, there's a whole legal system for figuring out who is in charge of settling your affairs after you pass away. So that blog post is linked in the link that I posted in Slack. You just have to go down to this slide. With that said, these are documents you should have regardless of whether or not you feel prepared to die or not. A will is the most important legal document because it is containing all of the wishes that you would like to happen after you pass away. The rest of these are important for while you're still kicking, while you're still alive. A healthcare proxy, and I should say I'm not an attorney, I'm not providing any legal advice here, but with that said, a healthcare proxy is going to say, hey, if I am incapacitated, this is the person who should be able to make healthcare decisions for me. There have been a couple lawsuits, and I don't know where they netted out, where the person had a healthcare proxy, but because they did not have a HIPAA authorization, they were not allowed to access the medical records of the person they were representing. So just think about that for a second. I'm going to appoint someone who I want to make medical decisions for me, but unless I have that HIPAA authorization, that person is not allowed to get access to my medical records over decisions that that person is making. Where does that make any sense? Well, HIPAA's an old law, came out in the 80s. Have a healthcare proxy just saying, hey, if I'm incapacitated, and you can get these forms online for free, just Google New York State healthcare proxy. You will get that. HIPAA authorization is just saying I'm naming this person and they are allowed to access my medical records. A living will is basically saying this is what I want to happen while I'm still alive. That is basically saying how long do I want to stay on life support? Do I want life support at all? Do I want to have a do not resuscitate order, which is basically saying if I die, do you want us to do CPR on you? Do you want us to try and resuscitate you and bring you back to life? People have a lot of reasons for saying DNR, do not resuscitate. Especially older people are saying, hey, if that's my time, that's my time. I don't want to come back. If I'm dead, I'm dead. So living will can cover a lot of that. And then the last one you want to be careful with is a power of attorney. A power of attorney, if the person has that document, basically says that that person can make any legal decision for me. So I've been in 2 comas before, where I was a little bit more prepared because of that. The power of attorney basically says, hey, if I'm incapacitated and my parents need to close my my bank account, they have the power of attorney. They have the legal authority to act on my behalf, sign their name as my power of attorney, and they can do basically anything that I can do legally. So the power of attorney is something that you probably don't want to provide to the person, but have in case of emergency folder. A lot of these documents you will need to get notarized or have 2 witnesses on. So that is something to keep in mind. It's not, it is better than nothing if you just sign your name on it. But ideally you get it notarized, and sign it in front of the notary, because then it makes it a more standing legal document based off of the notary witnessing the signature. So all documents to keep in mind. Does marriage allow for the spouse to act as a healthcare proxy and the power of attorney? Really good question. No, it does not for power of attorney. And for healthcare proxy, actually, I'm thinking living will. Healthcare proxy, by default, it should go to your spouse. Yes, they should be able to make those, but it wouldn't hurt to have that document anyway. Especially hospitals can get really weird around if you don't share the same last name. It shouldn't be based off of that, but sometimes in the heat of the moment, it's you just want to make it as easy as possible. Some people actually will keep a living will and a healthcare proxy in their glove box. So when, in case you get in a car accident and the EMTs, have someone, they go, oh, who are we supposed to get in touch with that you're headed to the hospital? They can take that healthcare proxy and pass it on to the hospital and say, hey, this person is allowed to get the information and go from there. And the living will is important to say, hey, do you want to be on life support? How long do you want to be on life support? All of that kind of stuff. Side tangent, think about being an organ donor really, really can help literally save another person's life. So if you are not registered, you can register on the New York State Registry. It's like donatelife.nys.gov or something like that. But being an organ donor can literally save someone else's life. Any other questions? Okay. Day-to-day living. Live your life out of a calendar and a to-do list. They are not the same. To-do list is literally all the shit that I keep on my notebook of things that I need to do, right? When things pop up, when other people ask you to do things, write it down because you don't know if you'll be able to fully get that task done, and you will feel better when you cross that task off your list. A calendar is strictly for appointments. Now, if you want to use your calendar to block some time out to get your tasks done, there's nothing wrong with that. But I've yet to meet a successful person who does not check their calendar every morning. People who are organized, people who are responsible, people who I respect are either checking their calendar every night before bed or checking it every morning when they wake up, right? When you book time with someone, it is a sign of respect and to them, or a sign of disrespect if you don't show up, right? So everyone's phone has a calendar. It is not hard to get it to sync. You can do it at Google Calendar. You can do it through iCloud. You can have it across all your devices. But being responsible, showing up for appointments, super, super important. I put on here no excuses, even if you don't have a lot of appointments. There are also no excuses to just no show for someone, to just not show up, right? How hard is it to pick up the phone and call the doctor's office and say, hey, I can't make the appointment? How hard is it to shoot a person a text or an email and say something popped up, I can't make it, right? Takes 15 seconds. They go, okay, no problem, whatever, right? But not showing up at all is probably the quickest way to lose my personal respect, and a lot of other people's as well. So live life out of your calendar. The to-do list is important. The calendar is even more important. When you respect your time, you'll start to respect others' times, and that in turn builds their respect for you. My mom always raised me with the respect your elders quote. I absolutely hate that phrase. Why should I just respect someone because they're older than me? Yeah, they may have more life experience, but they may have done bad things. They may have treated me wrong. They may be the most influential person that I could learn from in the world. But respect should be earned, not assumed. Right? Think about that for a second. I would like to think that all of you guys respect me. Why do you respect me? Well, because I've taught you things, because I answer questions, because I show up mostly on time, because, right, there's a long list of, I would hope, reasons of why you respect me. So make other people respect you, right? Give them reasons to build that respect and build respect with other people as well, right? I think it is a great thing that our society is moving away from just because they're older than you means that you have to respect them, they're better than you. I am so glad that we are moving away from that. But respect still must be earned, it must be built, and it must come from experience. So that's my personal opinion. Take it with a grain of salt because it is not the way our culture has run historically. But I do think we are trending in the right direction of actually saying, no, respect is not just something that comes with age, it is something that gets built over time. I will also add that keeping tasks, requests, incidents, and other noteworthy events recorded in writing with the date and time. I mostly do this at work, but it is applicable in other personal situations. Absolutely. Also, the reason why after I have a meeting, I will post a summary of that meeting in Slack, so that it is timestamped, so that when we come back to it 2 weeks later and go, oh, we talked about this. What did we end up deciding? Right. And I'll be in the same meeting with the same people and everyone is still there and everyone will go, oh no, we came up with an answer there, but no one will remember 100% of what that answer is. So going into a meeting with an agenda, having an agenda set before the meeting happens and distributed to everyone at least 24 hours in advance, is a great thing to do. Taking meeting notes and having them in a central repository that other coworkers can access them is a great idea. Keeping things timestamped, even if it's just a date on the top of your notebook page, can be really helpful. But and yes, Joe said, and super helpful for covering your own ass. Absolutely, right? Because there's a paper trail and you can say, no, I talked to this person at this time and this is what we decided in this meeting. Hopefully you are working in a environment where there is not a lot of blame to go around. That is not always the case. So definitely something to consider. Okay. When life comes at you too fast, when you're feeling overwhelmed, when the anxiety is creeping up, when the stress is creeping up, I think we already talked about how stress and anxiety are not the same things in the adulting part one. But first things first, take notes. Don't be afraid to use a notebook just to write things down. It is the #1 way to lower your anxiety levels. When you have everything written down somewhere, all of a sudden the weight comes off your shoulders because it's not all in your brain. There is something tangible that you can point to and say, this is what is causing all of my stress. If I can lower my anxiety, I will ultimately lower my stress because I can work through the items that are causing that stress. If you are blinded by anxiety, the stress is guaranteed to follow. But write it down, that lowers the anxiety. You can work on what you've written down and ultimately lower your stress. A whiteboard is a great option. I would not be sitting here today teaching you if I did not start my career with a whiteboard to just write ideas down without any consequence of going, oh, I wonder if I need to save this, or right, it is just an idea. For whatever reason, when you're standing up at a whiteboard, you are more likely to write things down and get ideas out of your head. I use a notebook every day. I started with a legal pad. I switched over to spiral bound. If you can use Apple Pencil and an iPad or some tablet, great for you. I'm sure there are all kinds of benefits. I can't do that. I need the notebook. I just prefer writing there. That's what works for me. Some people like sticky notes. Some people like coloring them. Some people do a layout on their wall. That is totally fine. I will say it is probably easier to get overwhelmed with sticky notes. But if that works for you, try it. Kanban and Trello, right? The whole to do, doing, done. And then Trello is a great piece of software. Jira is another one that is very popularly used in the software industry. I don't really like it. Some people do, and that's totally fine. And if your company is using it, you'll basically have no choice. But having some kind of project management system in place, even if it isn't digital, is super, super important. And then the last thing I have on this is identify action items out of every meeting. If you just met for 30 minutes or an hour and you get to the end of that meeting and don't have anything for people to do, why the fuck did you just meet for that hour? The whole point of a meeting is to make progress on something, but then also identify what are we doing next? Who is doing what next? It's not just who and it's not just what. It's got to be both. And bonus points if you got a when on it. When will that be done by? But who is doing what is super important at the end of every meeting. There is a great book called The 25-Minute Meeting. And it's a pretty quick read about how to run meetings efficiently. You will notice all of my Calendly meetings are either 25 or 55 minutes. There are all kinds of things that you're supposed to be doing in the those 5 minutes before your next meeting. But action items are one of the things that they talk about when you hit the 20-minute mark in a 25-minute meeting. You need to stop any further discussions and make sure any minute notes and action items have been identified before you move on to your next meeting. Questions? No, this is all mostly common sense, but it's what has worked well for me after a decade of working professionally and seeing people's stress and anxiety levels. Yes, Terry.
So going back to like with the like respecting an appointment. So let's say like you have like a friend and he was like, yo, let's go to this festival, and then like you just don't even call, like you don't show up, like does that, like, I guess this
It
I
impacts
know
the
I know you say it's
relationship.
disrespectful, but it's like
Oh, it is. It is totally disrespectful, right? Because what you're saying is I made plans, but I didn't find the plans or you important enough to follow through on them.
mm,
Right? It is saying I don't respect you enough because it's normally it's not a big deal that you can't miss it or if you miss it, right? It's saying, all right, you know what? Uh, the last dentist appointment that I had a sore throat, right? And my appointment was first thing on Monday, and I felt really bad, but I called on the weekend and I left a message and I said, "Hey, I know you're going to get this and my appointment's right afterwards. It's within 24 hours, but I got a sore throat. I don't want to get anyone sick." Right? I respect my dental hygienist, I respect my doctor, I respect the office. I don't want to get anyone sick, right? And so I called in and they said, no problem. Thank you for being cautious. Now, the thing that sucked was I had to wait another 6 months to get another appointment, but I respected them enough and their health enough to go, you know what? I'm just going to call them and let them know. Right. Now, if you're canceling consistently or not showing up consistently, of course, yes, that will impact the relationship. But when you go in Calendly and you reschedule, right? And you go, oh, I can't make this time. I'll just pick another one. I go, great. Now I get another 30 minutes of my day back and I'll talk to you when you reschedule. Compared to, hey, you booked a meeting with me and didn't show up, but I had to open that meeting. I had to stop my music. I had to stop whatever task that I was working on. I had to get Zoom all open. And now I'm sitting there for 5 minutes and no one shows up. And it's like, you know what? Things happen. People are running late. Shoot them a message. Hey, I'm on my way. Right? Or, hey, can't make it. Right? Okay, great. No problem. But just communicating that is a sign of respect for me. I really don't care if you cancel. It really does not impact my day at all. But what does impact my day is if you are a no-show, if you book something and don't show up for it. And that doesn't go just for me. That goes for any appointment you make anywhere, right? And some people will get wrapped up in their own head of like, oh, they're gonna yell at me if I cancel, or like I'm afraid of what their reaction will be, so I just won't show up. And it's like, in what world is it better to not communicate than to communicate? Right? It's like people who get a bill in the mail and they go, oh, I'll pay that, I'll pay that, I'll pay that, and they never do it. And they get another bill in the mail and they're like, oh, I'll get around to that eventually, right? I won't say 100% of the time, but the vast majority of the time, the quicker you deal with something, the more efficient you are at dealing with it, the better that outcome will be for you, right? I'm sure there are exceptions to that, but very few and far between, right? So be efficient, just communicate. That's what it all boils down to. You're going to be working on a project at work. you're going to have a deadline that you're up against, and it's super easy to go, I don't know if I can do this. And so you just backpedal, right? Or you don't communicate, you don't send emails, and you go, I'm just going to get it done. I'm just going to get it done. Well, now all of a sudden, everyone who is depending on you to get that done is worried about you because you're not communicating. But if you know you're going to miss a deadline, shoot the boss or the client or whoever it is a message and go, hey, I'm falling behind on this. I don't think I'm going to get this done by the deadline, but I have X, Y, and Z working, and I know A, B, and C are what I still need to get done. Then they come back to you and they go, how can I help? No big deal. What do you think the new deadline is? All questions that you go, oh, they're not mad at me. I can figure this out, or I can work with them. The thing that's going to burn respect the most is lack of communication. So even if it is something negative that you are saying in the communication, that is still 100 times better than just not communicating at all. Oh, I did not talk about this, but I did know we have it as a slide. So anxiety and stress are not the same things. In my opinion, reducing both is the best way of reducing both is identifying the cause and engineering your way out of it. The reason why you are stressed or you are anxious is because there is a lot that you need to get done, right? And when you are trying to get those things done, it feels like it is such a big thing that you have to get done that you'll never be able to get started on it. That is all engineering is taking a big item and breaking it down into smaller pieces. It doesn't matter what kind of engineering you're talking about, software engineering, all the way to civil, to whatever else. Engineering is just breaking down a big thing into smaller items. In software engineering, we call that project management. So treat your life as a project. What do I mean when I say anxiety and stress are not the same thing? Stress is in response to a recognized threat. Anxiety may not have an identifiable trigger. You are feeling anxious. You don't really know why you're feeling anxious, but it's just a feeling. You can't go, I'm anxious because of this one thing. If you can, what you are probably feeling is stress about that one particular thing, and that is causing anxiety. So I really like this Venn diagram because it shows you that stress is a reaction to one event. Anxiety is something that builds over time and then really lingers for a long time. So different feelings between the two of them. Stress is both stress and anxiety can be measured, but stress tends to be a more physical of a response. Anxiety tends to be more mental. That isn't completely true. You can see in this Venn diagram where the overlap is, but I don't know. At some point in my educational career, I wish someone told me stress and anxiety are not the same thing and showed me this diagram, right? Because once you can separate them out, you can better treat them individually. But if they're commingled, it makes it harder to solve. Okay. Project managing your life. Consider organizing your day into weekly or bi-weekly sprints. Did we go over this? I'm having deja vu. We did go over this. Okay. Did we go over health insurance? Okay. So two places you can get health insurance. You can either go to the New York State Exchange, which is a list of all the health insurance plans that you are eligible for. They will also help you through to see if you are eligible for a lower monthly cost based off of your income. When you get it through the state exchange, also called the ACA, the Affordable Care Act, it is broken down into 4 what they call metal levels, right? So if you're getting a bronze plan, that is going to be the cheapest monthly cost for you. the insurance company will pay roughly 60% of your health insurance costs. Once you've met your deductible, you pay the other 40%. That goes all the way up to platinum. If you are on a platinum plan, you'll have the highest monthly insurance cost, but they will also pay for 90% of your costs. You are only paying 10% of that. You do have to meet your deductible, and then there is something called an out-of-pocket maximum that once you hit your OOP, you don't have to pay for anything. Your deductible is basically saying that you need to pay for a certain amount of costs over the course of the year. Once you pay that, we will step in and start paying that percentage based off of your plan. And then there is something called a copay, which is basically saying something that you need to pay every time that you go to the doctor. You will hear people say, "Screw Obamacare! Obamacare is terrible. I've got ACA coverage, and it's the best insurance I've ever had." What an idiot! Obamacare and ACA are the exact same thing, and the state exchange is what the ACA came up with. So. That is the state exchange. Obviously, you can get coverage from your employer if they offer it. Most employers will. It is not always free. So oftentimes when you are hired at a company, they will give you a list of all of your insurance options. And they basically will take a premium out of your paycheck. So they'll say, we will cover up to this amount on this plan, and then the remainder amount of your monthly premium we take from your paycheck every paycheck, kind of like withholding. So keep in mind that sometimes it is worth it for you, right? If you've got a lot of health conditions, if you know you've got a lot of procedures coming up, it can actually be cheaper to go for one of the higher gold or platinum plans because your insurance is going to cover more of it. So health insurance is always a gamble of how much coverage do I really need? But that gamble can pay off. A whole world of HD, HPs. There is FSAs and HSAs. There's a lot more to insurance here, but just want to scratch the surface on that. If an employer does offer insurance, but it's terrible, doesn't that make you ineligible for certain ACA coverages?
Or maybe at least certain premium costs, it might be higher, I think.
I don't think, well, the premium costs are higher because it makes you ineligible for the subsidization of it.
Right. That's what I mean.
So it won't make you ineligible for that plan, but it will make the amount that you have to pay for it monthly possibly higher. And this is a thing that you can negotiate, by the way, too. You can, when you get a job offer, if they go, we can't give you any more salary, you can negotiate paid time off and go, well, I want 4 weeks off instead of 3 weeks off. Or you can say, hey, if you don't have any room in negotiation on my salary, can you bump me up to the next health plan for free, right? And get a little bit more coverage that way. And they may say, no, we legally can't, but sometimes you can negotiate on that. Last thing I will say on health insurance, don't pay a bill when you get it. Don't just pay a bill when you get it. When you get a medical bill, I heard a stat today for the first time that 80% of medical bills are billed incorrectly. I don't have a quote for that source, or I don't have a source for that quote, is what I meant to say. So I don't know that I would believe it's that high, but I do believe it is a high number. The number of times I've gotten a bill and called my insurance company and said, why was I billed for this? And they went, oh, it turns out that we billed this as an out-of-network provider, but they were in-network. We've got to go reprocess that bill. Or I've gotten a bill from my doctor and they go, oh, you owe $180. And I go, why? It was just an annual checkup. And they go, oh, because your insurance company hasn't processed the claim yet. Or I'll get a bill and they go, oh, they processed the claim and denied it. And so I call them and I go, well, why did you process the claim wrong? And they all go, oh, well, the doctor submitted the procedure, but they didn't submit the diagnosis. And because of that, the doctor billed you. The number of times I've gotten a medical bill and gone, I don't understand this. The right answer to I don't understand this should not be I will just pay it. The right answer to I don't understand this is call the doctor's office, call your insurance company, and go, the fuck, man, why did I get this bill? Please explain it to me. And they will walk you through that process. Blood work being billed incorrectly is all the time. There are just so many ways that a medical bill can go wrong. The other thing that most people don't tell you is a medical bill is also negotiable. So if you get a bill and you call up the doctor's office and you go, this is a $200 bill, I won't be able to afford to pay that $200 for 3 months. But if I can pay you $100 right now, but only if the rest of the bill goes away, they can actually negotiate with you, believe it or not. And they may actually take that deal. So something to consider, just like debt collectors, you should always, always, always negotiate with a debt collector if you are going to pay off that debt. And get it in writing. Never, ever do something on the phone. Actually, iOS 18 now allows you to record phone calls, which is awesome, and use that feature. But if you ever negotiate a deal, whether it's with a doctor's office or a debt collector or anyone really, always get that deal in writing. Think about if you bought a car and got no paperwork on the car, right? Never a good idea. Always get deals in writing. I do have a link to a video in here about the difference between premiums, copays, out-of-pocket maximums, all of that stuff. If you are curious about how the US healthcare system works, you are more than welcome to watch that video on your own time. Things that I wish sooner, I will go through this really quickly. A 401k is a employer-sponsored retirement plan. An IRA is an individual retirement account that you can open on your own. An IRA, you do not get an employer match. A 401k, you can get an employer match. What does an employer match mean? It means that if you put in $1,000, the employer will also put in $1,000 up to 3% or up to whatever percentage they set. That is free money on the table. That means if you are saving for your retirement, your employer is also putting money in your account for your retirement. So if you have a match, absolutely take advantage of it. Social Security is going to run out. No ifs, ands about it. They may make adjustments. They may find a way to replenish it, but Social Security is not enough to live off of. And it is a fallacy that a lot of people live off of, oh, when I retire, I'll just go on Social Security. I will be fine. Do not fall into that trap. Roth versus traditional is something that I could do an entire hour video on, and actually probably will at some point on my own YouTube channel. But the idea is, do you put the money in pre-tax, which is saying traditional? Do I not pay any taxes on that money when I put it into the account? Then all of that money grows over 30 years of your career or however long. When you go to take that money out, you then pay taxes on it at the tax rate that when you retire. The problem is you then pay taxes on all of that growth. We have one of the lowest tax rates in the history of our country in the past 100 years. Almost every financial analyst is predicting that income tax rates are going to go up significantly over the next 10 years and most likely by the time you retire. If that is the case, and again, this is all a gamble, the other option that you have is to open a Roth account. A Roth account says, hey, I'm going to pay taxes on that money today. But when I put that money in the account, because I've already paid taxes on it, all of the growth of that money over the next however many years it's in the account will be tax-free. Then when I take my money out of that account, I don't have to pay a dime on the money that I put in it because I already paid the taxes on it, or on any of the growth over that account time period because it was a retirement account and they were incentivizing me to save for retirement. You can have Roth or traditional 401ks or IRAs. They are slightly less common. Roth 401ks are slightly less common, but more and more people are taking advantage of it. So definitely recommend thinking about retirement. If you guys have any questions about retirement accounts, I'm more than happy to answer them. all of the rest of the stuff, I guess there's a fair amount of this. I will do a vote tomorrow if you would like to make a part 3 out of this. If you don't want a part 3 out of this, I will shut up. You have the slides. You can go through them and ask me any questions. But I will start a poll tomorrow in tomorrow's class to see if we want to do a part 3 to this, or we want to just make it about a capstone workday. With all that said, have a good night. GTFO. See you tomorrow.
All right. Did you want to see my wonderful spreadsheet?
Sure.
It should be clarified that this is not for which phone I'm going to buy, but what deal I'm going to take. Alrighty. Spent way too long doing this. Alrighty. I don't think there's a. So this is for the 16 Pro Max 1 terabyte. These are all the different deals. Anything with an asterisk, I'm on the Verizon unlimited welcome plan currently. So anything with an asterisk is using that unlimited welcome plan. Row 7 and 8 says requires either the unlimited ultimate trade in or unlimited ultimate to get that trade in value, or unlimited plus to get that deal. Just slightly different than the trade in amounts. I think one is 800 and the other one is 1,000. Well, yeah, 830.
So question for you. When's the last time you've broken a phone and had to get it repaired? Or lost a phone?
Almost never. However, I have Apple Care on well, all right, let me rephrase this. This is insurance through Verizon, and I'm on a family account that has I think 12 devices in total, and it's broken up, and we have that broken up by each individual cell line. So we just split the cost equally because it's charged to the whole account and not.
Gotcha.
So I personally haven't. If they didn't want insurance, I probably wouldn't have bought it, but for the savings that I get in phone service from being on a plan with like 5 other people, sort of worth it.
I will say that nothing will compete to what's hold on.
I don't remember